Hello and welcome to episode 7 of The East Meets the West. I am your host, Rigor, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Patsy the Angry Nerd. How goes it today, Pat?
It goes fairly well. Like we were talking about just a moment ago, it is rather chilly out today, but other than that, things are going fairly well. I'm excited to chat about these movies.
Excellent. So am I. So, folks, before we start talking about the films today, I just wanted to mention that this show, actually both this show and Then Is Now podcast, have joined the Darkening podcast network. So, Patsy, can you just tell the audience a little bit about the Darkening?
Yeah, the Darkening is a podcast network with close to 40 shows now. I have like 5 of them that I do. But we're a podcast network. We're based mostly in New England, and we cover between all the different shows. We have sports shows. We have a couple of sports shows. We have some horror shows. We have a wrestling show. We have now, obviously Then Is Now, and this show, which is something that we hadn't had on the network. So we're kind of branching out. So there's something for everybody. And you can see all of the shows if you go to thedarkening.com, or you can go join the Darkening Facebook group, and you'll be able to see all the different shows and find out all the different hosts. And yeah, I mean, pretty much anything that you could want, from comic books to spaghetti westerns, you're going to find on the Darkening. We have we have a bunch of live shows where we have great interview guests. We recently interviewed Michael Dorn from Star Trek: The Next Generation. We've interviewed just so many different people. It's awesome, and happy to be adding this and Then Is Now to the repertoire.
Well, that's awesome, dude, and I'm just so happy to be here as well and be part of the group. So, yes, listeners, I encourage you to check out all the great podcasts that are on there at thedarkening.com.
Yep.
Okay, today's films that we're going to cover are Shaolin Rescuers from 1979 and God Forgives, I Don't from 1967, starring Terrence Hill and Bud Spencer. Now, last episode, I briefly mentioned that I had a reason for picking this, and we'll get a little bit deeper into that later, but mainly we wanted to start covering Terrence Hill's body of spaghetti western work because we'd like to have him on the show eventually. So, Mr. Hill, if you're listening to this, please reach out to us and we'll set up a time to interview you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, that would be great. So he's very active on Facebook, so hopefully he'll find our show. Now, as we continue diving into the Shaw Brothers catalog of films, specifically the Venom Mob films, we come to the 5th movie to star those amazing actors called Shaolin Rescuers from 1979, also known as Avenging Warriors of Shaolin. Now, I do want to preface things by saying that between the subtitles and the various places online, I had a little issue trying to figure out the character names because there were slight variations everywhere. So if I say the name incorrectly somewhere along the way, I apologize in advance if I confuse anyone out there listening.
黑虎门功夫真不简单，练了长廊也是上乘功夫。你我都有一身的功夫，不知道哪天才有出人头地的日子，做一番英雄事业。西山寺遗在高进中变破了，追寻洪熙冠，一找到就地格杀。他是洪熙冠，是他。到药铺去买伤药，给什么人治伤的？说。说不定洪熙冠就藏在豆腐店。洪熙冠不在豆腐店。买点豆腐去了那么久，像你这样，我别做生意了。是。
The film opens with 5 members of the 10 Tigers of Shaolin: Hong Ziguan, Monk Sende, Hu Huiyan, Li Jinlun, and Lian Yasung fighting members of the Wudang or WuTan clan. The priest Pai Mei, referred to as White Brows here, and Gao Chin Chung. During the fight, all the Shaolin heroes are killed except for Hung Si-Quan, who narrowly escapes. Chun Ah-Chin is a local bean curd maker who uses the mantis style and likes to spar with his friend Ying Cha Po, a waiter who can use anything as a weapon, particularly a bowl and a pair of chopsticks. Although the two work menial jobs in which they are unhappy, they dream of one day becoming great heroes and dying for noble causes. Chu Sai is a light skill student at a local school who constantly is abused by his master and a fellow student. He ends up befriending Ah Chun and Cha Po after they save him from getting beaten up by his fellow students. Meanwhile, Pai Mei, Gao Chin Chung, and his fighting men arrive at a temple looking for the injured Hung Si-Quan and end up in a fight with the monks and Han Chi. Han Chi escapes, but the monks are killed, so Chi goes to look for Hung Si-Quan. Meanwhile, Hung has arrived at Chu Sai's school as the master is an old comrade. However, the teacher rejects Hung's request for help and immediately reports to Gao. Chu Sai, Ah Chan, and Cha Po find the injured Hung Si-Quan, and they conjure up schemes to get him medicine. Once healed, Hung Si-Quan thanks the three by teaching them special techniques to perfect their skills. Han Chi also meets up with the four after helping them in a fight at Cha Po's restaurant. However, Chu Sai's fellow student has spotted Chu purchasing the medicine for Hung. He reports this to Gao Chin Chung and leads the WuTan clan to Hung Si-Quan's hiding place. Hung and company escape and hide in a dye factory. Although they are trapped, Gao decides to wait until dawn to attack so as not to risk being attacked by surprise in the dark. Morning arrives and Gao Chin Chung attacks. Although Gao and his men are all killed, Chu Sai is killed in the battle while Ah Chin and Cha Po are mortally wounded. With government troops on the way, Ah Chin and Cha Po volunteer to stay behind and occupy the troops so that Han Chi and Hung Si-Quan can escape. The film ends as the two realize they've achieved their dream, dying for a noble cause. All right, Patsy, what's your initial impression of this film?
I liked this a lot, and this might be, from what we've seen so far, this might be the best choreography of any of the films. One of the things that I really liked is that it showcased the athleticism and agility and acrobatics of the various fighting styles. Just watching these different fights throughout the film, even just like the sparring, using anything as a weapon, tables and chairs, and there's even a little bit of drunken boxing sprinkled in with some rude customers at the restaurant. But it was funny. It was lighthearted. Even the fight scenes, which is typical with these guys. They're always smiling and laughing and having a good time, even when the stakes are really high. I will say that the ending of this one reminded me a lot of the first one we did, the other Shaolin one.
Invincible Shaolin?
Yeah, where the army shows up and like some guys run away at the end, and like that's just the end of the film. Just kind of ends on a freeze frame.
That's right, yeah.
But yeah, I had a lot of fun with this one, and it was a lot longer than most of the films we've been watching. Most of the films we've been watching have been around like 80 minutes. This one was almost 2 hours.
Yeah, it was really good. I agree with your assessment, too. I really obviously didn't know what to expect going in, probably same as you. And I was just so pleasantly surprised how, funny, engaging, and action-packed it was. Like, from beginning to end, it was nonstop action. I just loved it.
I watched a different version than you did, I believe, because I was able to get it in a different way. And the subtitles I had, they had different names for some of the characters than what's listed on IMDb, which I found a little bit confusing. But
yeah, that's what I was kind of saying earlier. So we're just going to have to stumble through it as best we can.
Yeah, it was kind of weird, but it's also like the name of the movie. If you search, Shaolin Avengers, it comes up as, what was that? What's the other title that it comes up as?
Oh, it was Avenging Warriors of Shaolin.
Yeah, so it's two different titles, and you get different characters based on the subtitles. I'm guessing one's the Americanized version and one's the Chinese version. So
right. It's basically when they released it in Hong Kong, it had the Chinese name, and then it was called Shaolin Rescuers. But here we go. So the Chinese name is Ji Shi Ying Zhang, which translates as Street Market Heroes, referring to the characters of Chen, Yang, and Han.
Mm-hmm.
But then the Shaolin Rescuers was the English title in Hong Kong, and then it came over. It's also the English title on the release, the DVD release. But the film first came out on March 24th in '79 in Hong Kong as Shaolin Rescuers, but it didn't get to the United States until May 11th of '84. Apparently only in Hartford, Connecticut, and that's where it was called Avenging Warriors of Shaolin. So that can add to the confusion of people trying to watch this movie.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, but it is whatever you call it, like they say, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. This is an awesome movie. Like, I had so much fun with it. I actually watched it this morning because due to circumstances beyond my control, I wasn't able to watch it last night, so I got up early and watched it this morning, and I just finished watching it maybe half an hour ago, and so it's very fresh in my mind.
Oh, good.
I will say, though, there is still that element of far-fetched feats of martial arts, like, strangling somebody with a ponytail and, leaving bloody cuts across someone's chest with the said ponytail.
Right.
It's like, all right, come on. And then, obviously the leaping ability. It's like, oh, I'm going to jump 30 feet straight up.
Yeah. They did that quite a bit too, which I loved.
Yeah, that's fine, but like the fight scenes where they're doing backflip after backflip and jumping and spinning and the stuff that you would see on like the uneven parallel bars on at the Olympics, like there's some awesome stuff, like the way they throw everything together and new weapons, which I always like. Every time we see one of these films, there's a different set of weaponry that's used.
Right.
I will say when they attack the first temple, and they're like, all right, these are the two guys we've got to watch out for. He was soaked in like special herbs as a kid, so he can't be hurt except his crotch. And it's like,
right.
And they essentially shove a sword through his crotch.
That was horrible.
And then they're like, all right, the other guy, he's weak on his eyes and his crotch. So you attack the eyes and I'll get the crotch. And like,
right.
It was seriously a Three Stooges routine because they kept trying to poke him in the eyes and he kept blocking it. The other guy goes up behind him and kicks him in the balls. It's like, oh my God. I'm a super ultra master of martial arts. Here's my finishing move. It's like, oh my God. Like, all these guys are fighting with like this amazing choreography with the copper ring and the giant like warhammer, for lack of a better term, and
it looked like a pumpkin on the end of a stick.
Yeah, like it definitely looked like a pumpkin, but like they're making all these amazing moves and doing all this amazing stuff, and it's like, oh, we defeated him with a kick to the crotch.
Right. Oh man,
kind of anticlimactic.
Yeah, especially like the setup, because I felt like that should, even though it wasn't crucial to the plot, I would have liked to have seen, the guy who's impervious to stuff a little bit more before they killed him. They just killed him right away. Like, oh, that's what he can do. Let's go kill him, and they killed him.
Yeah, we saw like one time that he blocked the sword, but like they immediately exposit about it. They're like, oh, he blocks the sword with his chest. And they're like, oh yeah, he's impervious. The only way to defeat him is to kick him in the balls. Like,
right.
Like, make it something cool. Like, oh, he's only, you have to hit him like just under the jaw, with like a specific pressure point. Like, that would have been cooler as opposed to,
stab him in the crotch.
Yeah. And they stabbed him. Like, that sword went in halfway. Like,
oh, yeah.
Then they pulled out that sword and used it on the other guy.
Right. He got it about as bad as the guy in, was it Masked Avengers, where he jumped over the carriage and landed right on the spear?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that was Golden Arms, I think. But
yeah, I know I knew which thing you were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, like that's not my favorite. Not my favorite fight scene.
It's just uncomfortable to watch. Oh man. So all right, let's talk a little bit first about the cast and stuff, and then we'll really dive into the film here. So of course we've got the amazing, wonderful Chang Che directing,
Hmm.
and he also co-wrote it with Ni Kwang again and another person named Nan Pin Sai. And now for our cast, we've got a guy that you and I have not seen before. His name was Jason Pai Piao, or I've seen it spelled Bai Biao, and he played Hung Si Kwan, who was on the run from, I guess, the government, and was, the one who was injured in the movie, and they had to get him medicine. And it took this guy, Jason, many years to achieve stardom. He was born Liu Ko-young in 1946, and he starred in many films. However, they all pretty much failed to garner him much attention, and it wasn't until 75 when Pai signed a contract with Hong Kong's newly founded TV station called CTV that he suddenly became a household name with a string of popular costume martial arts TV shows. And then CTV went out of business around 1978, so he starred in TV shows for other stations, and then he made a triumphant return to the Shaw Brothers. So from 79 till the mid-80s, he was one of the studio's busiest action stars with as many as 5 movie releases per year. And in the 1990s, he continued to have major roles in action series and movies like King of Robbery. So I'm looking more forward to see this guy in more movies. I liked him in this.
Yeah, I thought he was very good. But I mean, it's tough to find a weak link in this entire cast.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah. We've got a. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's you see these movies over and over and over again, and you see the same actors, but it's like because they and I keep saying this every week, like they have such great chemistry. So even in their just their dialogue or their fight scenes, like they're so intimately familiar with each other that you have this camaraderie and friendship. And one of the things that I enjoyed about this, and again, it reminded me of the other Shaolin film, was watching the training go on at the tofu store. I was going to call it a bakery. It's definitely not a bakery. The tofu store where he's doing the push-ups on his thumbs, like, oh, so cool.
Yeah. That was such like a scene out of Rocky where he's just training with everyday objects like the big bag of beans and pushing the what was it, that big cement thing that turned? I guess that's what they did to grind up the beans.
Yeah, he was using it because I was confused. I was like, what's he doing with this? What are the nails there for? Like,
right.
It's like he didn't use the nails for anything. Maybe it was just like a way to place his, like where to place his arm.
Right, and if he hit the nails, he knew he did it wrong, and he'd have to, try and, like, because if you watch his flashback, the master was kept using a stick not to hit him, but to guide his arms to show him what position they should be in.
Yep.
So maybe that was the same thing with the nails.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, if I hit the nails, I know that I've done this wrong. And like that's my punishment to myself is, scraping myself up. Which makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was so much fun. Like I really, really enjoyed like the and then like his buddy comes in and they're like, fighting over the tofu, and like that choreography was like, I love when they do that in these movies where they have just kind of like, it's almost like a showcase of like, this is, check out our skill, see how great we are.
Right.
See what we can do and how much fun we are, like, to interact with each other.
Yeah.
Because, like, the first few minutes has no dialogue. Like, after that first main fight scene, like, there's no dialogue. It's just them kind of, like, laughing back and forth at each other. I thought something was wrong with my the version of the movie I was watching. I'm like, oh, they just keep laughing. But yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I kind of did think there was something odd too, and then I was like, oh, okay, they're just not talking. It was almost like a Buster Keaton kind of thing where they didn't need to talk.
They just keep like pointing at each other and laughing. Like,
yeah. So we've got, of course, as we said, the Venom Mob cast here. We've got Lu Fang, who plays the villainous Gao Chin Chung. I thought he was particularly villainous in this one. I know he's played villains in other ones that we've seen, but he was like, he just had a look of evil in his eyes.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah,
Like,
he was
not a nice guy.
Usually even in Golden Arms, there's almost like a playfulness to the villain.
Right.
There was no playfulness to him. This was all business, all like very serious, like just 100% all in bad guy.
Yeah, yeah. I almost wonder if that was sort of a counterbalance because there was so much playfulness with the main characters.
Yeah, it definitely because the fight scenes were fun. Like it reminded me a lot of like some of the Jackie Chan stuff, especially when they start introducing the stools and the chairs, and it was definitely a contrast between him just being this ruthless, unstoppable like killing machine, and these guys that are they're fighting for their lives, but they're also having a good time.
Right. So then we've got Lo Mang, who played Chen Chin, or I saw it as Jin, I think, in the subtitles.
Yeah.
So it's either Chen or Jin. Some of the you know what it is some of the pronunciations are unclear. Like a P is generally pronounced like a B, I guess, and a Q is like a sh kind of sound. So it's hard. But then Jen, CH, I guess, is more like a J sound, so Jin.
I mean,
So
in my subtitles, there was Young Badao, and it's like,
yes,
that's like I'm like, that name is not anywhere. Like,
I saw that in a couple of places. We'll get into that when we get over to Philip Kwok. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Chang Shang here, who, as I said before, Chiang Shang. He's my favorite of the Venoms. And last 2 episodes ago, we talked about Philip Kwok and his backstory. So, give you a little bit about Chiang Shang. He played, of course, Han Chi, who's Han Solo's cousin, and I'm just kidding. As we've mentioned previously, many of these Chinese actors went by several different names in real life, and he is no exception. Some of his alternate names are Chao Gang Shang, Chao Kang Shang, Chu Gong Sang, Chu Kang Sang, Kong Sang, Kwong Sang, and of course just Venom, which I think Philip Kwok was also just referred to as Venom. Chiang Shang was born on April 4th in 1951 in Taiwan and was originally named Chu Kang Sang. He grew up in the Fuxing Opera Troupe in Taiwan and became a stunt actor in the film industry afterwards. When director Chang Che founded his own production company in 1974, he went to Taiwan looking for talent, and Chiang Shang was one of the people that he invited to come back with him to Hong Kong. He joined Shaw Brothers in 1976 as a basic actor and got his prominent role in Chang's Shaolin Temple that same year. His first leading role arrived a couple years later in The Five Venoms. His boyish charm and supreme agility gave him the nickname Cutie Pie by Venom fans, got him cast in pretty much all the Venom films during their era. He was a light skills martial arts expert who specialized in acrobatics, jumping, flipping, and rolling, along with a variety number of weapons. Double weapons, I think, was his sort of weapon of choice in certain films. He cleverly incorporated this training with on-screen fight choreography to showcase the fastest, most nimble, and most intricate fight routines ever seen on screen. Chiang also went behind the camera and tried out as Chang's assistant director, as well as being a martial arts choreographer in various films. In 1981, with the support of Chang, he went back to Taiwan and founded a new production company with his Taiwanese cohorts. Chiang acted and choreographed the action scenes in their debut film, Ruthless Tactics. And along with Philip Kwok, he starred in Ninja in the Deadly Trap. And then he directed a movie called The Ghosts in 1983, Attack of the Drunken Goddess in 1984, and Exciting Dragon in 1985. But his life kind of got a little... took a downward turn here because afterwards he remained in Taiwan because that's what his wife requested, and unfortunately it was difficult to find work there at the time, and he became very depressed, ended up getting a divorce, started drinking heavily, and he died of a heart attack in 1991. But you know, his remarkable on-screen presence and his film legacy is still felt today. There's all kinds of fan clubs and stuff and fan pages about him.
Yeah, and obviously we're talking about him on a semi-weekly basis, and extolling his virtues and talking about how awesome he was, in the films that he appeared, and I think he's left a really awesome legacy.
I agree. I agree. So then we've got Kuo Chui, aka Philip Kwok, who was young Chapo or young, like the one you said, young Dao Po.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I got it as Ying and Young.
Yeah,
he was awesome. What were we gonna say?
I said I have a Ying Chapo as well.
Okay, we'll go with that then. Ying Chapo. He was so good in this, but it was interesting how usually he's sort of the standout character because he's so badass, and in this, he was so friggin' funny. Like the facial expressions he would make, and like I thought this movie, they all shined equally. Whereas he didn't. No one really stood out amongst everyone. They were all kind of, at least in my mind, I thought they were all kind of equal.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like they all had their shining moments. They all seem to have equal share of the spotlight.
And they all showed their skills off well. But he was just. I mean, there's one scene where he leaps up onto the poles hanging over the across the ceiling, and he hooks his feet onto them and is hanging upside down just by his feet. I was like, how?
Yeah, it reminded me of the scene in 1989's Batman film where he gets kicked and like falls off like this, the bell tower at in the climactic fight scene, and manages to like swing back up. It's like, wait a minute, what? And
Yeah.
Vicky Vale saw him like swinging from the gravity boots earlier in the film, like just swinging back and forth upside down. I was like, I can see where they took that from.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, he nonetheless was great. It's so funny because watching him in so many badass roles, I was really taken aback by the fact that he was so funny. He was like almost like a little kid in this. Actually, him and Lo Meng were both kind of like a couple of kids.
Yeah, and I loved their dynamic. Like, they just
Yes.
it's almost like they were playing teenagers. Like that's how
Right.
it felt. It was kind of like I mean, it's not the same type of analogy, but when you had in Step Brothers with Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly, like, yeah, they're like men in their 40s, but they're essentially playing the roles like they're teenagers.
Right.
And like that's how this was. Like they're goofing off at work and like stealing food and
Yeah.
not being rude to customers, but like dealing with rude customers in exciting ways.
Right. Right. I totally agree with that because they're like, it's like, when you had those schlub jobs that you did when you were a teenager and then the boss would say something and you make a face behind his back, or like even Lo Meng at one point like raised his fist like he was going to pound the boss in the head and then he like quickly took it away when the guy turned his head.
Yeah. Yeah, like that. They definitely had, I think, a lot of fun with with these roles for the two of them. But they were also my favorite part of the movie. Like their fight scenes, the choreography was just superb.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So just real quickly continuing on, we've got Sun Qian played the student Chu Sai. And as we mentioned in a previous episode, Sun Qian's only main skill was kicking. And so as the movies progressed, and in particular this movie too, his on-screen fighting scenes became less and less and less because he just couldn't keep up with the other Venoms, with all the acrobatics and the various styles that they could do.
Yeah, and I kind of noticed that. I'm like, wow, he's, relegated to the guy that's getting bullied. Like,
right.
Like the only, punch he landed was on that, like, I don't know, for if I were to refer to him as like, you know, the American stereotype, the Chad of the group. It's like, oh, do you know who my dad is? Like, you know, Chad from the yacht club. You know, like that's the vibe I got from him.
You know what I called him in my notes? I called him Malfoy. He was like a
that
dark-haired
works.
Malfoy.
Yeah. Spalding Smales.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, it's like, oh, did you see he tried to hit me? Like, he attacks him and he's like, oh, he tried to hit me. It's like, like everybody in that group was such a jerk. I'm glad they're all dead.
Oh, absolutely. I think the actor who played Malfoy was Ku Kwan Chung. I couldn't really get a character name on him, so I'm not sure if that's the character's name or the actor's name, but I'm going with the actor's name.
Yeah, I think so.
So, and then we had a few others. We had Wang Li as Brother Wang, Yang Swing as Fang, Fan Tian Kong, Yu Taiping played Zhu Fang, Tony Tam Jan Dung played Tiger Kid, and Lao Shi Kwang played Leopard Kid. And did you notice they both had leopard print shirts? The Tiger Kid didn't have tiger stripes.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I was kind of surprised they didn't just refer to him like they usually do in these movies as like what their weapon is. You know, I would have called him, you know, Tiger Kid and Copper Ring.
Right, right.
But I guess they needed to have like some kind of synergy between the two characters. I mean, yeah, they both looked like they were, you know, 14. So I guess the kid moniker kind of works, but Tiger Kid was the one that had like the deadly kicks, and Leopard Kid was the one that had the copper ring that he kept using on everybody. So,
right,
I'm not quite sure. Like they didn't remind me. Like you would think that the Tiger Kid would be doing like tiger style martial arts, like
right.
But he didn't. So it's like, oh,
well, some tigers like to kick, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I mean that's, you know, for anybody who does not have a cat or hasn't dealt with cats, their front claws are curved a little differently, so they will latch onto something so it can't get away, and then they will kick with their bigger, thicker hind feet because they have thicker claws on their back feet. So that's kind of like their fighting style, which is not how tiger kung fu works. You don't grab a guy and then just start kicking him with your back feet. Like,
right. Oh man, that's so funny. Yeah, I had a cat that used to do that to my forearm. He'd just like jump on and start gnawing on my knuckles and then scratching my forearm with his back feet.
Yep, that's what they do. Grab and kick. You know, use the claws that are curved inwards, which is, you know, kind of the tiger style, where you and we've talked about this a little bit before, where you're strengthening your knuckles and your fingertips, you know, kind of like so you can do push-ups on your thumb or push-ups on your thumb and index finger. You strengthen those, you know, you do the like the iron hand technique, and then you're able to use your hand almost as claws. Like there's eagle claw, and there's, I think, cat's paw is another version of it, but like it's the same thing. Like you're able to use your fingers as almost like, I don't want to say blades, but you're able to put holes in stuff. Like if you look at some of the trees that you'll find, and I think we saw this in one of the other movies, where there's like holes in like trees outside of like a Shaolin temple, and that's from fingertips. Like you're putting holes in a tree with your fingertip because you strengthen it up, and like that's a variation of that style.
That's so cool.
I don't recommend just doing it. I recommend training for it first.
Yeah, don't start trying to poke your fingers through wood and stuff and people's skulls.
And you got to see a little bit of that fighting style where, I forget who it was now, but I remember they put their hands up in the fighting stance, and they had their index fingers kind of extended a little bit.
Yeah.
Almost look like they're getting ready to like scratch an itch or something. And that's why, like you'd have your knuckle trained, so you'd be able to strike with the knuckle. And because if you hit somebody with your fist, it's like that flat surface. But if you hit them with the knuckle, it's almost like a penetrative attack. Like you could crack someone's sternum like at a specific point, like you're focusing all the energy from the punch into that small point as opposed to that larger surface area, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can see that. Imagine if you had claws, like not even like Wolverine, but just little claws that came out of your knuckles, and you punch someone in the sternum with that.
Oh yeah, or like the guys that put the claws on their knuckles.
Right, right.
Oof.
Oh man, we haven't seen that quite yet. Although we did see a couple of different little tridents. They weren't really size, but they were tridents. I think that's how Gao finally kills. I forget which one it was now, but he throws them up in the air and kills one of. Oh no, he didn't quite kill him, but Philip Koch's character got them in the chest.
Yeah, and that was like the weakest thing. Like he threw them up in the air and they fell down, like
Right.
and embedded them. Like that was a little far fetched. But it's like you just lost to a dude like wielding forks.
He's the Blue Raja.
Like he beat that guy with the dual broadswords with the little forks earlier.
Yeah. What was it? It was I think it was Lo Ming that had a big trident, and he was spinning it on the chest of one of the bad guys.
Yeah, that was cool. Like that was right before like the final fight.
Yeah.
Against Lu Fang, but it's like oh that was interesting. Like I like how they had all the weapons stored up on the roof, and he starts throwing them to everybody.
Yeah.
And Gao intercepts the spear, and he's just like, oh man.
He was him like whipping the spear around was so amazing. That was just such amazing choreography.
Oh yeah, like those fight scenes. Like I really like the not ranged weapons, but like the spears and the like the tridents and stuff like that when they're using like the longer ranged weapons. Those are so cool. Like especially if they're fighting somebody that's using like a sword or like sai or something like that. Getting to see the different weapons going up against each other. It's
Right.
I mean, it's no flag, but which is apparently the most unbeatable weapon in all of martial arts.
Well, there was the scene where Philip Koch beat up Malfoy with a cloth napkin.
That's true. Yeah, he was slapping him around with the. I was like, what is that? Like a sash? Like what is he beating him up with?
I thought it was a napkin. I don't know.
I mean, it's all I know is that he just had like a strip of cloth that he was using to fight with, and it was awesome.
Prepare for a spine-tingling, nerve-shattering podcast featuring all your favorite monsters. You won't believe your ears when you listen to Monster Kid Radio. Hear your host, Derek M. Cook, and his ever-rotating stable of guests discuss your favorite classics and sometimes not-so-classic monster movies. Subscribe to Monster Kid Radio through iTunes or Stitcher, or visit monsterkidradio.net before the next weekly episode of Monster Kid Radio. Go through the archives for interviews with Sarah Karloff, Victoria Price, and Joel Hodgson. Listen to discussions about movies like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Island of Terror, and King Kong. And don't forget convention coverage from Monster Bash and the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival. Classic Monsters, Modern Talk, and the head of Rondo Hatton. Only on Monster Kid Radio.
Rise and shine, my sinners. When Father Evil starts his day, he gets a little deadly. Deadly Grounds coffee has the richest, smoothest flavor you'll find anywhere. It's sinfully delicious. Once you go deadly, you never go back. Order yours at getdeadly.com. Coffee's so good, it's scary.
Did you know 47.66% of this film is an action sequence, which is a lot because Life Gamble, for example, that we did last episode, only had 13.58% of the film being an action scene or a fight scene.
Yeah, and that one was, I think, my least favorite. Like what we were talking about. It's like where's where's the fighting? Like, oh, this guy rolled a die. oh, that's exciting. As opposed to this one where it's like, oh, this dude's like flipping around and, beating up guys in a restaurant with using chopsticks in a bowl.
Right.
Like this is great. You know what it reminded me of? And I'm 100% sure that they used this movie as inspiration.
What?
Kung Fu Panda. The scene where
Oh yeah.
he's trying to eat the dumplings.
Yeah. What was it? He kept taking someone kept taking the dumpling from him?
Dustin Hoffman's Sifu character kept taking the dumplings.
That's
and
right.
he was using the bowl
right.
and the chopsticks, and it's like that's where they got this from. Like it's funny watching these films and then seeing, being reminded like, oh, this reminds me of this fight scene. Oh, this reminds me of this. Like you see the influence that these movies have had on so many other amazing films in the genre.
Right.
It's like they helped, it's like, watching Kurosawa films and seeing their impact on Westerns.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and it's just so incredible. And the whole scene where Philip Kwok and Lo Meng are sparring and he's doing the whole chopsticks and bowl trick, that was just incredible. I mean, he's flipping the bowl around, he's, holding it up, he'd roll it over his head and then grab it on the backside and just not break it. And I wonder if in rehearsals or whatever, when they were shooting, how many did actually break, or was he that good that
well
he could just do that?
looking at how they react, because there's always this slight pause after every movement that they make, just the way that they're like, okay, they both reach and then they pull it in, and it's the same as dance choreography when you're doing fight choreography. Right. The only scene that I know for sure wasn't like that was there was a scene in a Donnie Yen film, and the name escapes me, where he and the guy he was supposed to go up against were having a contest because they weren't sure how the movie was going to end, but they had a contest to see who was going to hit the other one first. And so they just let them go. Like it wasn't choreographed. It was just, see if you can hit me, and I'll see if I can hit you. And they just went with it. And it was one of the most brilliant and you can tell the difference between that and a choreographed fight scene, because there's very deliberate movements. It's like, okay, I'm, punching up, but then I'm reaching down with both hands, grabbing this stool, lifting it back up. Like you can tell that's a rehearsed movement that they did over and over again. You're not relying specifically on muscle memory. You're relying on, this is a rehearsed movement, and you can tell by the way that they move. It's not as fluid. It's slightly stiffer.
Yeah.
But it still looks amazing.
Right. There's always little moments where you can catch it, like when someone's coming up behind another character and swinging a sword at him, and that character is not looking at him, but he manages to duck and then turn around and hit back or something. It's like the little stretches here and there that's choreographed, because it's like boom, 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 sword, whoo, he ducked, but he couldn't have possibly seen it.
Right. But it just lends that character this air of mystery. Right.
That they have this supernatural senses or whatever. One thing I really liked in this movie was the music. It kind of reminded me of Toccata and Fugue in D minor.
Yeah, the Dracula music.
Yeah. So it was just, I felt the music was very sinister in this film, which we hadn't really, I don't think in the ones we've done so far we've heard that kind of music,
No, definitely not. But again, where we had Wu Fang being just, the most ruthless character with no humor, no, levity to him at all, which, like we said, even in some of the other films, it's like, okay, he's the bad guy, but like, you never really felt like, he was cold and remorseless. Like, he just felt like a bad guy.
Right. Yeah, he was just, he was they showcased him and all the other guys in that opening sequence that you mentioned. At first, the first time, because I watched this twice, and the first time I watched it, I guess I wasn't I was only half paying attention because it was the opening credits, so I kind of missed where they were, who was being killed, and all that. And I went back and watched it again, and I looked up some historical stuff on it too because I guess Monk Sanday was a real guy in real life, and he was killed while defending. He was defending Zichan Shaolin, the Shaolin temple that he established after the burning of a temple called Julian Shaolin. So he was a real dude. He got killed off in the movie, and the 10 Tigers of Shaolin, except for Sanday, they weren't Shaolin monks, but Shaolin trained fighters who are loyal to the temple. So I guess this is often misinterpreted in many of these Chinese kung fu films that the Shaolin fighters battling with the various Qing and WuTans are Shaolin priests or monks, but they're not. They're just trained fighters.
Yeah, and obviously another very obvious influence, Pai Mei, once again.
Yes, or white brows as they call them here.
Who was featured heavily in the Kill Bill series.
Right.
Played by, in this case, Gordon Liu in Tarantino's films. But it's like, obviously, Tarantino liked the look of the character and liked, who he was. Changed things around a little bit, and I think he was a member of the White Lotus clan as opposed to the White Brows. And I will say White Lotus sounds way cooler than White Brows.
Yeah. See, I saw that on the subtitle. It said that was his name.
Yeah, there was something at one point where they said that there was they were trying to add more to the White Brow clan or something. Like it may have been something that got lost in translation, but yeah, because there were a few times that it was just like I would read the subtitle and I'd be like, okay, that's probably not what he said, but that's a close approximation. So I'd kind of, make my own dialogue based on, because it's like that dialogue felt a little stilted. But if you just kind of look, it's weird the way I'm putting it, but like look a little bit to the left of what he was saying, then you'll get.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, hey boss, I quit now. It's like, wait, what? Like, that's probably not exactly what he said. It's probably like, oh, you know what? I quit, So it's close, but not quite the same. So you're able to kind of get a little different feel of the dialogue based on, the idiosyncrasies of, English and Americanized speech from the Chinese translation.
Right. Yeah, I'd love to see a dub of this. So I have to, an English dub. I think that would be interesting to watch. It's very funny to watch sometimes because as we've said before, the subtitles and the dub voices are often different, conveying the same meaning, but sometimes with dubs they manage to make it in a more colloquial English way that makes more sense to us.
Yeah. And you also got to remember the way people would talk in different time periods, like the way somebody would talk in 1975 is not the way someone would talk in 1995. You have the different slang and different idioms that kind of come and go throughout their just the cultural zeitgeist.
That's groovy, man.
Yeah, right. Like, when's the last time you heard someone outside of Bruce Campbell say that?
I use it often. One of the things that I loved in this movie was where, first of all, Jin and Ying are constantly torturing their bosses, and Jin's got this setup where in the threshold of the doorway on the floor there's a piece of wood that spans it, all the way across, and he's got it attached to like a string or a small rope, and every time the boss goes to leave, Jin's on the other side of the store, whatever, for lack of a better term, and he pulls it and it trips the guy and the guy can't figure out why he's always tripping over it.
Yeah, and like the second time we see him do it, he like specifically stops and waits and he's like getting ready.
Yeah.
And he still trips over it.
Now I'm curious to see what yours said on the translation, because on that one, the second one, he looks at it and says, "I must find a monk for a ceremony." And that made absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah, it was something similar to that. It's like, I think he was like, no, he said something about a priest for mine. And I think it was, like, I need to perform an exorcism, or I need to get this, place blessed or whatever.
Oh.
Because, like, it's...
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, like, I think that's what he was implying. Because he looked down and everything was fine. Then as soon as he went to step, he tripped over it. It's like, how do you not notice the twine tied, like, intricately across? Like... And, your employee, every time he stands in that one place, you trip over the thing leaving. I mean, they were kind of mean to him. Like, at one point, they took him and threw him out of the restaurant through the wall.
Oh, yeah, the restaurant manager, yeah. Because he was pissed that they smashed all the tables, even though he told them to fight because those guys were going to steal his chef.
Yeah, it's like, there was that one part where he kept telling the guy to put his head on the table.
Right.
And he finally just smashed him right through. Like, that was a fun fight scene. That I liked a lot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was good. Yeah, that's the one where he's beating up Malfoy with the napkin.
Yes. And then...
whatever.
Then they throw him through the wall.
Yeah, and then they throw the boss through the wall. But it was hilarious, though, when they sparred, and they broke all the stools in the place, like every single one of them, because... what's his name? The student there managed to flip them all over so he could walk across them like he does on the poles. And, a fellow Quack gets the idea, well, we can't do that, so he smashes all the stools. And then the next day, or however many hours later, the restaurant's open and everyone's sitting down, all the customers, and all the stools just start breaking underneath them.
Yeah, because they used them for sparring practice earlier, and they kept running on all the things to mimic the Big Dipper thing.
Right, but then Philip Quack got fed up with that, and he smashed them all.
Yeah.
It's like, so they must have just not even nailed them together. They just stuck them together and put them back up.
Yeah, it just made them look nice. It's like, oh.
Then Philip Quack does that thing where the boss is like, all these chairs are broken. And he goes, no, they're not. And he sits down, but he does that trick you can do where you don't actually sit. It's like your legs are holding you up, but you look like you're in a seated position.
It's like horse stance, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
Where you're in that low position, but you don't quite, make it there.
And he's just at the right angle where it looks like he's sitting on the chair, and then he gets up and walks away, and the boss is like, he sits on it, and of course it crashes underneath him.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, there's so many funny things in this movie, as well as like shocking things. Like, oh man, in that end fight where one guy, I think it was Tiger, gets his leg just like totally pushed up in a position that it's not supposed to go in.
Yeah, that's at the very end, and then he uses the pole to snap his neck.
Yeah. Oh.
I was like, that dude's got to be really flexible, because that is an uncomfortable, compromising position.
I think that was a fake leg. I think his real leg, like his lower half, was under the floor.
Honestly,
because there's no way that.
Yeah. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised, because some of these guys, like how limber they are and how much they stretch, and it wouldn't surprise me if it was actually his leg.
It could be, yeah.
I mean, one way or the other, it wouldn't surprise me.
Oh man, that was just so brutal. I was kind of like, I had to back away from that for a little bit. I was like, and I don't mind gore films, but that was just good.
Yeah, as someone who's had multiple knee and leg injuries, like, I don't like that. I'm not a fan of those types of things. It's definitely tough to watch.
I was waiting for someone on the Big Dipper poles to fall and hit their crotch on one of the poles. Speaking of crotch.
Yeah, right? Oh, that's, apparently the one way to defeat a martial arts master.
Yeah.
Poke him in the eyes or kick him in the crotch. Like one of those two.
Kick him in the nards. Kick him in the nards.
You know what's funny? There's a documentary, for people who aren't aware, there is a documentary about the fan base of the Monster Squad called Wolfman's Got Nards. And it is absolutely amazing. And we interviewed Andre Gower, who played Sean. And it was one of the best documentaries I watched in all of 2020. And I highly recommend it to anybody who is a fan of that movie.
Is that on Netflix?
I don't believe so. I know it's on Amazon, but I can...
Oh, Amazon. Okay.
Well, you can buy the Blu-ray on Amazon.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and your interview with him was really good. That was an enjoyable episode.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, it looks like you can rent it pretty much anywhere for $3.99. Amazon, Google Play, YouTube, all that stuff. But I recommend owning it because if you're a fan like I was, like I got emotional several times, especially when they talk about the kid who played Horace.
Right.
Brent. He's check that one out. But yeah, apparently the same tactic you can use to defeat or temporarily defeat a werewolf is the same tactic you can use to utterly destroy a martial arts master. Although I suppose kicking is different than sword him in the nads. Like that's
stab him in the nards.
Yeah, slightly more effective.
One scene that I thought was really impressive was where what's his name? Queen Young. I'm sorry, no, Gao kills all the men at the Queen Young temple, and
yes.
They catch up to Hong because he escaped. But just before that, he meets up with his friend, and then the friend's like, "All right, you go, I'll hold them off." And that fight was really good because that one guy went up against all those bad guys, and even though he lost, he put up a damn good fight for quite a while.
Yeah, until he got forked.
Right.
Like that was his downfall. It's like, oh, really, all of this stuff and a fork is what takes you down?
That's right. He's the one. I misspoke earlier. I said it was Philip Kwok's character, but yeah, he got the fork.
Well,
he got forked.
Philip Kwok did too. Like, throwing
all right.
When he threw the forks up in the air and then they came down and like somehow embedded themselves. Like that I didn't get.
Right. But that fight was really. I was surprised. Just one guy going up against all them bad guys that he lasted as long as he did.
Yeah, it was very impressive.
And one thing about the end fight that was really cool was the fact that they kept trading off opponents, which kept it interesting.
See, I like when they do that because it lets you. It's not just like, okay, my style against your style. It's suddenly like, oh, now I have a different like. It's this style against that style, and this against that, and this weapon against that weapon, and it's like, oh, this is so cool. Like you get to see such a range of different choreographies, sort of intermingling and giving you and that final fight scene goes on for like 20 minutes, and like,
oh yeah,
we've talked about this in the past. In order to do like a fight scene like this, it's going to take you a long time. Like you're going to be very tired by the end of it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it must have been shot over days because it was so complicated.
Oh yeah, and you at the final, like the climax to it, where you have Liu Fang fighting all four of them, and like the way they finally stop them. You know what it reminded me of? Again, I've said this 100 times. The final, not the final, but the confrontation on Titan in Avengers: Infinity War. Or like, it's like, okay, I'm holding you down with, this and Spider-Man's webbed your arm, and like you've got, a bunch of, everybody kind of combining to finally defeat this guy. Like you had, and his ponytail was being, stuck to the pole, and then they shoved the table in front of him, and like they pinned him down. It was glorious to see.
Yeah, because Han had put his foot up against the ponytail, holding it to the pole.
Yes.
And it was just a great. I would love a screenshot of that. There was just a great. Once they had all combined and closed in on him and finished him off, they were all in like cool poses doing it.
Yeah, and they rammed the trident through him from behind, so it had to go through the wood like stanchion that was behind him. The wooden beam there, the support, and then they jabbed him in the front just for good measure.
Yeah, and I love that. But prior to the fight, the night before, Hung basically fills them in on what all the bad guys, for lack of a better word, powers are, like what all their skills are. Like the one guy with the giant pumpkin weapon, and then the other guy with the sword that would fake you out because his shield was a bamboo shield, so he would just stab you right through his own shield,
which he did at the beginning to the monk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very similar to to what they were saying about the guys. It's like, all right, kick him in the crotch. That's how we defeat him. Like,
right.
Because they had studied their opponent's weaknesses, and that's how they base their attacks.
Right. Because I like that going into that fight knowing all those things because then, like, for example, Philip Kwok's fighting the sword guy, and he's using a stool to defend himself because he knows what the guy can do, and he still, of course, pierced through the stool, like through his shield and then through the stool. But that was, I think, to his disadvantage because that's how he disarmed him and finished him off.
Yeah.
I think, if I'm remembering that right.
Yeah.
So I thought it was cool too when they used Hung was teaching them to use their chi again the night before where they're hiding and there's these like wooden containers at the base of the wall that they're hiding behind, and he teaches them to each just sort of touch it and use their chi, and you can hear the wood cracking. So you knew exactly what was going to happen, that if somebody jumped over that wall, they'd go right through the wood. And of course, that did happen. But then, boing, they went right back up again.
Yeah, it's like, how did you bounce back up from that? That was a very smart burglar alarm, I guess, or intruder alert.
Yeah, that's true. And I was going to say, too, that the hole that the guy fell through, like just one foot went through, but it was small enough that his foot would get stuck. It wouldn't be so easy to just boing right out of there,
Well, shows what you know. Yeah, I thought he was going to get stuck, too. I thought that was the whole point.
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess not. Like, they were just like, nope.
I know we're jumping all over here, but speaking of boing, there was a scene earlier, which I forget, I think it might have been Malfoy's character, where Philip Kwok was like flicking lint off his shoulder, and it was making this boing, boing sound effect.
Oh, I thought you were going to mention when he was jumping on the tables like a trampoline, like you just saw it
right
bouncing. It's like, that is not how a table works.
It was so obvious that there was a trampoline just below camera level,
But it was a fun scene.
Oh, yeah. They were all so good. I love Chiang Shang's fighting, especially in that end battle, though. He was just all over the place, just moving. He's so fast.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's really impressive, like, what he was able to do. Like, I love watching these movies. I love their fight scenes so much.
Yeah. So I think we've covered a good majority of it. Final thoughts on the Shaolin Rescuers.
Well, I'm going to say that, again, I highly recommend this one. I think of the ones that I've watched so far, because the only ones I've ever seen are the ones that I've been watching for the show, and I'm trying not to influence myself with any other films, and I don't watch the trailers for these either. I think this one has my favorite fight scenes, the best choreography. It's tough to say, like, the most fun characters, but I definitely really liked the dynamic between the main guys there, and it's just so much fun watching them spar and then eventually fulfill their prophecy that they wanted. Like, oh, I'd rather get beheaded than serve tofu every day for the rest of my life. Like,
right.
And it's like, yeah, I as anyone who's worked a retail job for any significant length of time, yeah, I feel you, dude.
Right. Yeah, I agree. With everything you said. It was just so much fun. It was so entertaining, and I do the same thing. I don't watch the trailers. I hadn't seen it before, so I really didn't know what to expect. And I'm just glad it was way, way less convoluted than the last movie. I mean, in fact, I don't even think this movie was convoluted at all. It was fairly easy to follow. Whereas, Life Gamble, you needed the book to help you figure out what the heck was going on there.
Yeah,
but this was just so much fun.
Yeah, it was tough. It was.
Yeah.
But again, we were able to get through that.
Yeah, yeah, and come out on the other side with Shaolin Rescuers, which again it shows Chang Che's ability to change things up. I don't think any two of his movies are the same.
Yeah, I there are definitely some similarities, like we talked about with this. There were a few, like the ending was definitely very similar to the other Shaolin film.
Right.
But, because, these guys take turns, who's going to be the hero, who's going to be the villain, who's going to be the super badass, who's going to die, who's going to live. I love the way that, he directs his films.
And that's one thing I forgot to say. I wanted to mention about when you walked into the final fight there. again, and I think I said this before on one of the previous episodes, is you don't know with these movies who's going to live and who's going to die. So there's real tension. When you're watching it for the first time, you have absolutely no idea. In fact, when Philip Kwok got hit, and for the first time in that end battle, I literally went, no, out loud.
Yeah, you never know who's going to make it. And, like you said, it does really raise the stakes because, you try not to, you're going to get attached to these characters because they're so charismatic and likable. And then, one of them gets killed off halfway through the film, or, they make it almost to the end and they have like this heroic death. And,
Yeah.
even if they've been slashed repeatedly and now they're full of arrows, they're still going to go out in a blaze of glory.
Right. And then the end.
Yep.
That's one thing that Chang Sheh should have worked on was his endings. He never really, they're done. That's all I'm telling you of the story.
Yeah, it's very, very rarely is it completely satisfying.
Yeah. And here's another thing. I apologize. I meant to mention this at the beginning, but what exactly? So, was it basically the WuTan were part of the Qing government, and they were just trying to wipe out the Shaolin? Is that what the story was? Because I couldn't understand why Hung was on the run. What did he do? Because they kept saying, "Oh, the court's coming after you," and I was like, "Well, what did he do?" They didn't really specify, except the fact that he survived the fight at the beginning.
I couldn't really tell. For me, it just looked like, warring factions, like we generally see in these. Yeah, I didn't see any, or I couldn't see anything that I was like, okay, this is definitely what's going on.
Yeah, it was interesting. So, all right, folks. Well, that was Shaolin Rescuers from 1979, and we hope you get a chance to check it out. And some of these movies are a little hard to find, but other ones are not so much. So next, first we're going to take a break, and then next when we come back, we're going to discuss the spaghetti western God Forgives, I Don't from 1967, starring Terrence Hill and Bud Spencer.
We come from the retro future. We want you to be nostalgic for what's to come. A new channel and distribution network for smart people with bad taste, featuring content from Church of the Subgenius, Creature Features, Cinema, Insomnia, Sleazy P. Martini and Guar, Trauma, Corey Maccabee, horror, sci-fi, Saturday morning cartoons, midnight movies, and assorted trash we love. Add our channel OSI 74 to your Roku player or visit OSI74.com. All systems go.
Hey, cats and kittens, do you remember the 50s? Jukeboxes, hot rods, malt shops, and sock hops.
No, not really.
Oh, well, do you remember that TV show Happy Days? Fonzie and Richie and all like that? Sit on it, etc.?
Kind of.
Then join us for These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast where we watch every episode and give you the lowdown on what it all means. Find us at TheseDaysAreOurs.Libsyn.com and follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. Be there or be square.
You're sure you don't remember sock hops?
Sorry, no.
Okay, then.
You won't get away with it in the long run. Even if you're a lot faster than me, my man will make you pay. And there's an awful lot of them, pretty face.
You never saw him before?
Never. Ain't often you meet a type like that.
No. You know him, huh? Yeah, I think so. He's the one I'm looking for. A week ago, the MK&T train was robbed. $100,000 in gold. How many people do you know capable of pulling such a thing off? Bill. Our fancy friend Bill, San Antonio.
Since when have dead men started going around robbing trains?
I ain't saying I know how things went with you two a year ago, Cat. But one thing's sure, Bill's alive.
Why are you so interested in this business?
The Herald Bank took out a policy for the whole amount against its safe arrival. 100,000 for the train. 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 I work for the insurance company.
You haven't changed a bit, you old jackass. Be quiet, Rose. No one's going to cut your throat. I just want to get a piece of information.
How do you like that? Here I was thinking you'd come for me.
I asked you a question.
And you got my answer.
Do you know what I think, dead man? He's gonna be mighty sorry he isn't dead.
This is no time to rest. Come on, get up.
All right, so we are now discussing God Forgives, I Don't, the 1967 spaghetti western, directed and written by Giuseppe Colizzi. This is the first in a trilogy, which is followed by Ace High and Boot Hill. Now, first thing I want to do is, on the poster, the names above the actors are swapped. And I will say Terrence Hill, the way they painted him or put him in this picture, he's got really wide eyes, like he's very surprised about something. Looking at this poster, we see Bud Spencer and Terrence Hill, and it almost looks like Bud Spencer, like he's exerting himself greatly, so it's almost like he just took a shit on the ground, and Terrence Hill is responding to that, like the way their faces are on this poster. I mean, look at that poster and look at their facial expressions and tell me I'm wrong.
I'll have to look that up. I don't think I saw it.
But fortunately, that does not happen in this movie. But what does happen is the story begins with a train coming into town and everybody waiting at the train station for the train. They're all excited. And the train doesn't slow down the way it's supposed to. And it keeps going and crashes into the wooden fencing to stop a runaway train. Although they're lucky the train had been slowing down, because you're looking at 500,000 tons of steel. Like, it's not going to slow down, because someone put up a little wood barrier at the end. But they go in, and everyone on the train is dead, except one person who identifies Bill San Antonio, even though Bill San Antonio is supposed to be dead. Now, Bill San Antonio is played by Frank Wolf. Terrence Hill plays Cat Stevens, which is a fun name there. Also known as Pretty Face. That's how Bill San Antonio refers to him. And he refers to Bill San Antonio as Dead Man because he had killed him in a duel, or so he thought. Bud Spencer is Hutch Jackass Bessie. And these are the first few characters we're really introduced to. So, during a card game, Bill San Antonio accuses his old friend and partner Cat of cheating at cards. So, he goes on to this long diatribe of like the type of funeral he would want, and back and forth about, you could tell he's laughing and joking, but he's got a very menacing air to him. So they decide to have a duel, but Bill orders all his men out except for his lieutenant and right-hand man, Bud. Bud gives a gun to Cat. They have their duel. Bill is shot and killed, seemingly. So they are told that no matter what happens, whoever dies, set fire to this place and burn everything. So when they learn that Bill San Antonio may not be dead, they hearken back to this. So Cat is told by Hutch, who is an old acquaintance of his, who's now an insurance agent, that the train, in addition to having everyone killed, was also robbed, and there was $100,000 worth of gold on that train, which again is like 30 million. No, what would we say? 50,000 was what?
What, 1.2 million?
million.
Yeah.
So we're looking at like double that, obviously.
Right.
All in gold. So Cat remembers that the gun he used in the duel was handed to him by Bud and has a sneaking suspicion that it might have contained blanks. He sneaks away at night with Hutch's horse and leaves it a little further down so Hutch can eventually find his horse. He searches and is followed by Hutch and eventually finds the hideout of Bill's new gang. When sneaking into the house, Cat is caught but saved by Hutch. He is caught in a weird trap where he's hung upside down, but he still manages to fight everybody off except for one guy who Hutch then dispatches. Using Hutch's considerable strength, they remove the box with the gold taken from the train and hide it down on the ground by some cliffs. I just want to point out that Cat was kind of a jerk, forcing Hutch to carry this huge trunk and not helping him at all.
Right.
Like, such a jerk. The two have a falling out because Cat wants more than the percentage that was offered by the insurance company. So they shoot a couple of times, and that brings the attention of... Oh, no, they don't shoot because they're like, oh, if you shoot, they're just going to find us easier. So they have a big fight, and Cat, using his cat-like agility, is able to, land several blows on Hutch, but Hutch hits him once and knocks him out. But that's when he finds out that Bill and his men have arrived. Now, Bill's gang, in order to maintain his secrecy, Bill actually had ridden by somebody, and he's like, oh, you shouldn't have looked up, curiosity, and he shoots the guy dead because he can't have anyone ruin his rouge or his subterfuge.
Right.
So when they are stealing the gold, they're stealing the stolen gold and hiding it, you find out that Cat can't swim, and now that the two of them have been captured by Bill's gang, they start to torture them using the very same methods that they know both Cat and Hutch can't stand. So Cat, I think he gets it a little worse. He keeps repeatedly being dropped in a well, only to be lifted up just a little bit, just enough to, they ask him a couple of questions, and he refuses. He actually spits water into Bill's face. But, it's classic villain, classic scary villain, because Bill, before he tortures them, gives them a nice meal, and lays out his entire plan of what he's going to do to them, which I thought was a nice touch. So the two are tortured by Bill, knowing what they can't stand because he's familiar with them. So Cat by water and Hutch by fire, but they refuse to tell where the gold is. When Bill and most of his gang leave for a short while to meet the secret partner, which we don't get to find out who that is. At least, I don't think we do. Cat suggests to Bud, who had been literally whipped by Bill for being too conspicuous, and blamed the surviving witness at the train, blamed for the surviving witness as a train massacre, that he can lead him to the gold. So Cat leads him to the gold. He's like, oh, this is where the gold is, and he starts digging it up a little bit. But he had also buried a knife there, and he used the knife to kill Bud, throwing the knife into his throat before he can shoot him. When Bill returns, he sends his gang to search for Cat. Bill and two bandits find Cat in a cantina at the nearby Mexican village. After his two companions have been shot dead by Cat, Bill, who is being held at gunpoint, suggests that they share the money and forget Hutch. At Bill's lair, the three men that are left there try to get the information from Hutch, but the man assigned to guard Hutch refuses to open the door, because that's what he was told by Bill. He said, if anybody tries to get in here, you shoot him. And Hutch is able to, using his incredible strength, break the wooden board to which he had been tied. He then, annihilates everybody that comes in. He opens the door, lets them in, grabs the first two guys, smacks their heads together, kills the next guy using another guy as a human shield, and then finally kills the last guy by yelling to him, and he turns around and just gets shot. He's like, "Oh yay!" And the guy turns around and gets shot. It's like, "Oh, you idiot!" At the place of the gold, so where the gold is buried. I don't like the way that's worded. At the place of the gold. So where the gold is buried, Cat intends to reproduce his first duel with Bill, but with dynamite instead of fire. So instead of having the fire burning the whole time, he lights a fuse with dynamite. Well, the fuse burns away. They move into position to draw, but are interrupted by Hutch, who's holding a rifle and tells them to drop their guns, and he asks about the gold. Cat says the box is there, but the gold might not be there. He tries to open the box while keeping an eye on the two of them. Fuse is still burning, which I really like. It's like the ticking clock thing.
Yeah.
Bill draws a hidden derringer and shoots Hutch, but Cat throws another hidden knife, and the two pick up their revolvers and shoot. But now Bill is having to draw southpaw because his shooting hand got a knife through it. So Cat wounds him, shoots his other hand, and shoots both his knees. So he's pretty much crippled. So Bill's crawling towards the dynamite, tries to bite the fuse off. Cat carries unconscious Hutch away to save him, because Hutch has saved him a couple of times at this point. And then kaboom, no more Bill. So at the end we see Hutch coming to, even though he had been shot. He wasn't. I thought he was dead because of the amount of blood in the back of his head.
Right.
But what do I know? After watching all these Shaw Brothers films, I shouldn't be surprised. Yeah, he even says, they're lying on the wagon with bags of gold. Cat says he has to have a bullet taken out of his head, but they'll discuss the fate of the gold when he's strong enough to hold a gun. And the final note on this is a lot of film time is consumed with artistic moving pictures of things like horses galloping in an artistic manner on trails or through water. And yes, this movie probably could have been half an hour shorter without all that. But now, have you seen this one before?
I had not. No, this is my first viewing.
It was mine as well, and I enjoyed it. I thought this was a good film. I thought it was more complex than some of the other movies that we have watched.
Yes. Like the first half is a little bit convoluted because of the nature of the flashbacks. I thought, anyway.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from on that. But I will say that I liked the complexity of the plan, where Bill wanted to screw his gang out of the treasure because, being an outlaw, the price on his head, and he says this at the end, the price on his head kept increasing over and over and over.
Right.
And he was, kind of wary of even his own men turning on him.
Yeah.
So he decided that if he could fake his own death, which he did very well, like it's very hard to, nowadays it's a little easier, but, in the time frame of this movie, it's very difficult to identify a burned body. And the coroner even says as much, that, he was not 100% sure that this was Bill San Antonio. And I like the fact that his tombstone says Saint Antonio.
Right.
It's just a slight, variation, but
right.
I liked that. It's weird. It's a weird thing to kind of focus on, but I liked it.
Yeah, yeah. They both mean the same thing, but yeah, I see what you're saying. But I wanted to answer one of your questions earlier about Bill mentioning his secret partner. Wasn't that the insurance president?
Yes.
Because when he sat down at the end, he told, Cat that's who he was teamed up with.
Yeah, he mentioned it, but we never get to see him.
Oh, right, yeah.
It's just one of those, because I didn't think that we saw him, but I remember him saying that at the end, because that's when he was trying to, hey, let's just us split this, because, here's how I knew where and when to rob this train and how to do it. And,
Yeah.
Because I'm in with this guy.
Exactly, and the insurance guy was giving him all the information, like how to, bypass whatever security protocols are in place.
Right. It's like, okay, here's what we're going to be doing. Here's how we're going to do it. And here's how to beat it.
Right. What I didn't understand at the beginning was when the train comes in and it comes to a stop, how did it do that if everybody was dead?
My guess is the only way it came to a stop is because there was no more coal feeding the fire, and it just happened to... Because, you don't need a conductor to keep it on the trains. You need a conductor to make sure that it's maintaining a specific speed and, it doesn't go too fast and jump the rails. But
right.
if you're dead, no one's feeding the engine, so it's just gonna go until it coasts. Because even when the engine stops, the coal fires go out, the momentum, because of so much weight behind the engine, it's just gonna keep going for a while.
Right.
I mean, it still managed to smash through the safety barrier.
Right. My other question is, the one guy who survived, why did he get up and bolt? You would think he would. I mean, maybe he just didn't know he was at the train station, but I was just like, dude, you're there. You can go get the cops or, law enforcement to help you.
My guess would be utter shock and just the trauma of having gone through this experience where he was shot, and he watched everyone else die around him. I think that's kind of, he was hysterical and in shock.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I liked it too. I didn't know what to expect going into it. I guess from just stuff that I had heard over the years, I thought it was going to be a lot funnier than it was, and it really had some comedy in it, but not a lot, which was fine by me. It worked great. I thought, the copy that I watched had a lot of scratches on it and grain, and that to me added to it. It gave it that grindhouse feel. It wasn't even widescreen, which I think it would have served it a little bit better, because there were some shots where you could tell things were off camera that you should be seeing. But it gave it that grindhouse feel, like when we watched Death Rides a Horse, where it didn't really matter. The story was good enough that it was enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, I thought I thought it worked, and I thought it worked well. Yeah, there was attempt at comedy, but most of the quote unquote jokes were being delivered by Bill San Antonio, and it was just basically him laughing at his own jokes and telling people not to laugh,
right?
Because he's the only one who's allowed to laugh. It was stuff that he found funny, but I didn't think that it was anything that I would look at and be like, oh yeah, this is clearly played for laughs. This is clearly humorous, because there was an overall serious tone to the film for the most part.
Right.
I mean, there were a few little digs at guys, but it wasn't good-natured or well-meaning. It was when he kept calling Bud an imbecile and beating him with the riding crop.
Right. But then the whole joke thing came full circle, because at the end, when Kat and Bill are facing off, and Kat says, "Oh, the gold may or may not be in the chest," and and Bill reacts to that, and he goes, "Oh, what? You like a good joke,
Yeah.
But I thought a lot of the good humorous moments came from the good chemistry between Terrence Hill and Bud Spencer. I think their characters. I mean, this was the first time they'd been teamed together. And their chemistry was so good that they ended up going on to make a whole bunch of films together. There's another trilogy that we're going to check out after this one. It's called the Trinity Trilogy, and it's got 3 movies. They Call Me Trinity, Trinity's Still My Name, and Man of the East. And I think those ones are supposed to be more humorous in nature. But it's just, those two guys just were really funny together.
Yeah, I agree with you. They definitely had some good chemistry, and I thought this was one of the better ones. And again, just like Shaolin Rescuers, this was, I think, the longest of the films that we've watched in this genre. This one was I think they were both an hour and 40 minutes, give or take, as opposed to the usual 60 or 70. It's and I've seen a few films that just barely made their running time, but there's 35 minutes of actual plot-driven stuff, but then another half an hour of like B-roll and filler. And this one, again, like it said in the synopsis, there is a lot of focus on nice shots and artistic-looking shots, but I don't think it really took away from the film. Like, certain ones you'll see, like, it's like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is, integral to the plot, and then we'll cut away for 5 minutes and just show like a waterfall and nature scenes, and it's like, what are we watching and why is this even here? Like, it makes the movie feel disjointed, and this one didn't have that. Like, there was nothing that I was like, oh, okay, this took me right out of the film. Everything seemed to drive the plot forward.
I felt that a lot of the shots were tight shots. There wasn't a lot of, except when they were outside, there weren't a lot of wide shots. Like even in the opening when they're at the poker table and you don't see half the faces of the guys that are there.
Yeah.
Did you notice that? It was just a lot of not really close-ups, but just tight shots.
I like the way they do that, but there was one scene, I think it was when they were talking to Bud, or Bud was speaking, and they zoomed in on his mouth. And it's like, I get why you did this originally, but like knowing that it was going to be translated into English, like it's close up. The whole screen is just his mouth, and his mouth is moving, and the way his mouth is moving is not producing the sounds that you're hearing out of the speakers.
Right.
And my wife is like, what are we doing here? Like, what is going on? And I'm like, just don't worry about it. Like,
just go with it.
Because she came in, because I was watching it in the Pat Cave, and she came in, and she's like, "What is going on here?" And I'm like, it's translated from, it's dubbed from Italian. So, and this is one of those 50-50 ones where, because I believe everything that Bill said was in English, and everything that Kat said was in English.
Right. I'm pretty sure he spoke English. I think he was an American, or at least half American.
And, so they were speaking English.
I think Terrence Hill was speaking English at certain points.
Yeah. Well, like, certain times, like, these guys are absolutely speaking Italian.
Yeah. So it was interesting. So we've got the director, Giuseppe Colizzi. He died of a heart attack at age 53 and 79. But this movie is considered one of his best films because he does, as we said, he takes the material very seriously, and the characters are multi-dimensional characters, and the plotline's pretty intelligent too. So I think this worked for him.
Yeah, I agree.
And so let's get into the cast here, because we've kind of mentioned them. Terrence Hill plays Cat Pretty Face Stevens, which that reminds me of Angel Face from Ringo.
Yeah, I even mentioned that. I'm like, yeah, that guy's name is Pretty Face, and in the other movies, the guy was Angel Face. And it's like,
yeah, that's right, you did.
I'm like, oh, so they're good with their nicknames. It's like, what do you look like? Oh, that's Horse Face, and that's Mule Face, and that's Angel Face,
Butt Face.
Pretty Face, and Ugly Face, and that guy, he was brewing up his own moonshine, and the still exploded. That's No Face.
They sound like Dick Tracy villains.
Yeah, or Batman. You got Two-Face.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, Clayface.
Yeah. What was the Dick Tracy one? Little Face.
Yeah. Prune Face.
Yeah, Prune Face and Little Face and No Face. Oh, yeah. I get why Frank Wolf, as Bill San Antonio, is called Dead Man over and over again, but he's only called Dead Man by Terrence Hill.
Right.
And it makes perfect sense, because why wouldn't that be his name?
Well, and Cat's only called Pretty Face by Bill, because Bill is being derogatory when he says that to him.
Yeah, like there's definitely some tension there, and they don't like each other much. They might even have like a grudging respect for each other.
Yeah.
But they certainly don't trust or like each other.
No. And I don't think Cat was very trustworthy at all to begin with.
Yeah,
he was a good guy. But...
See, I didn't see him as a good guy. I didn't see him as, like, I didn't see anybody like, this is who I'm rooting for in this movie. Like, they're all pretty awful. Like I don't feel like there's a specific hero. Like, there's definitely a bad guy, and that's Bill San Antonio. We get to see him do bad things.
Yeah.
But, like, Cat does some bad stuff. He kills a lot of people. And, like, he even sends that one guy to his death. Like, I don't... You know, he's like, hey, go tell Bill San Antonio this.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. And he's like, oh, yeah, that guy told me to blam, you're dead. It's like, where'd you get that horse? This guy gave it to me. He said I have to see Bud. Bud's in charge, right? It's like, oh, Bud's in charge. Blam. Oh, and to continue on with the character's name, Jose Terran was Flatface.
Ah, there you go.
So I just noticed that. It's like, some of these are fun, like Frank Branya as Lou, smoking player with mustache, and
right.
Bruno Arie as older poker player with no mustache.
Yeah.
Roberto Alessandri as poker player with mustache on Cat's right. Giancarlo Bastianoni as poker player on Cat's left with no mustache. It's like, wow, the depth of character development for these background guys are
right.
It's unrivaled.
Oh, they're just NPCs. Who cares?
It's like, oh, who are you? I am the man with no mustache. Unless it's been a couple days and I haven't shaved, then I am the man with a slight mustache.
I am man with just mustache on the left.
What if you move? Oh, then I can't. That's my signature. I'm always on his left with no mustache.
So let's get back to here. Terence Hill, he was born Mario Girotti on the 29th of March in 1939. He's an Italian-American actor, film director, screenwriter, and film producer. He started his career as an actor as a child actor, and basically, gained roles in action and comedy films. And obviously he got together with Bud Spencer in this one, and they kind of teamed up for quite a few movies. They Call Me Trinity is one of his most famous ones that he did. And he did the sequel to Django, which was Django Prepare a Coffin in 1968. And it was kind of interesting about that because the Sergio Corbucci, I think, who did Django, recommended Terence Hill to this director here, whose name escapes me, to play in this movie. So that was kind of an interesting thing, how it kind of goes back and forth,
Giuseppe Colizzi.
Colizzi, that's right. I couldn't remember his name. But basically, him and Bud Spencer, with their original names, they were asked to change their names to appeal to an international audience. And I thought this was interesting because Girotti was given a list of names to choose from, and he picked Terence Hill because TH were his mother's initials. His mother was Hildegard Thiem, so that's why he picked Terence Hill, and he's still called Terence Hill to this day.
So kind of like Scott Mary from the last one.
Yeah.
Taking your mother's name.
Yeah. So then Bud Spencer plays Hutch, as you mentioned, Hutch, Jackass Bessie. His original name was Carlo Pedrosoli, and him and Terence Hill both acted in a movie called Hannibal, about the guy that grabbed the elephants and had an army of elephants go across the mountains to attack Rome.
Yep.
That movie was in 1959, but they never actually met on the set there. And, he was 6'4", known for his height. He was born on Halloween, October 31st of 1929. And this guy had a pretty interesting background. He was a swimming champion in his youth. He got his law degree. He had several patents. And then towards the end of his life, he dabbled in politics. But the reason he took the name Bud Spencer was because Spencer Tracy was one of his favorite actors, and he happened to be holding his favorite drink, a Budweiser. So,
well, funny story that's kind of connected. My brother's middle name is Spencer because my mother's favorite actor is Spencer Tracy.
Well, it's funny that you said that because I was going to say my son's name is Spencer because of Spencer Tracy.
That's funny how it's all connected.
Yeah, 6 degrees of Spencer Tracy.
Yeah, right?
Oh, my God. So Frank Wolf, who plays Bill Deadman San Antonio, he worked in a bunch of Roger Corman films early on, and so I think he was American. Yeah, and then he traveled to Europe to find success because he wasn't really getting anything here, but he did get some success in Italy, and he was in a movie called Salvatore Giuliano in '62, and he became a major star in the spaghetti westerns. He played Brett McBain, the friendly farmer, in Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West in '68, which we will get to at some point. He's also in another movie that we have to cover at some point, Sergio Corbucci's The Great Silence. That is one of the best spaghetti westerns of all time. And then he started to, he was in a couple of Giallo films, like Duccio Tessari's Death Occurred Last Night, and he was in Caliber 9, which is a Poliziotteschi movie. It's an Italian cop film. And sadly, though, Frank Wolf suffered Great Depression and killed himself in the Hilton Hotel in Rome in December of '71. So it's kind of sad when we follow these actors and find out what their tragic ending was,
Yeah, it's always, tough to look back on these guys, and it's like, man, like that's such a, like we were saying earlier about
Shang.
Blank on his, yeah, like that's too bad. Like there's so many folks who achieve stardom and it just affects them differently. Like some people are able to deal with it and not have any adverse effects on their lives, and other folks just takes them down a dark path because they meet up with the wrong people and the wrong crowd, and they get the wrong advice, and they're like, oh, this person's my friend, why would they steer me wrong? And next thing you know, they're broke, and
yeah,
they have nothing left, and they end up ODing, or something terrible happens to them.
Yeah. So on a happier note, this movie was spoofed by a goofy film called Ciccio Forgives, I Don't, which was made a year later in '68. And it's basically the same plot. It's just like a real silly version of this movie. So that would be interesting to check out at some point. I can't imagine it, but
I dig it.
There was an actor named Peter Martel, who was originally supposed to play Cat, but the rumor is the official story is he broke a toe when he kicked the leg of a chair, but according to some people, he broke his leg when he fell from the stairs of the Spanish motel after his wife slapped him in the face because he'd screwed the makeup artist.
See, I was going to say, breaking your toe and not being able to continue on in your specific profession, I will say the two extremes of that. Viggo Mortensen, when he kicked the helmet in the scene in the Two Towers, I believe it was, when he was worried that the hobbits were dead, he kicked the helmet and he screams. He broke his toe. That's why he screamed.
Oh.
But Peter Jackson liked it so much he kept it in because he thought it was like this real anguished cry that fit the scene perfectly. On the other side, Jack Daniels of the whiskey fame broke his toe kicking his safe because he couldn't remember the combination, probably because he was drunk, and it got infected and he died.
Oh my God. What the fuck?
So I could see on the one hand, like, oh, I broke my toe, I can't continue. And, yeah, I mean, if he was screwing around on his wife, like, yeah, like slap him and knock him down the stairs.
Slap the shit out of him.
Yeah, like I'm fine with that.
So that's when the Corbucci recommended Terrence Hill to him, and the rest is history. Which, of course, like I said, he wasn't actually Terrence Hill until he took on this movie, and then they had him and Bud Spencer changed their names. But the original title of this film was The Cat, the Dog, and the Wolf. That's what the writer wanted to call it, because he kind of made it like an Aesop's fable kind of tale. Because you've got Cat Stevens is like a cat. He has feline stealth and agility. Hutch is like a mastiff. He's thick-set, hairy, quick-tempered, and he's like a dog, a bloodhound on the trail of the money. And Bill is like the fox, like all of Aesop's wolves. He's intelligent and cunning, but in the end, he just ends up overreaching himself. So,
and also he's played by Frank Wolf.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
I think that works. I like it.
Yeah. So, and the movie made I didn't get a chance to look it up, but it made 3 billion lira at the box office that year, making it the 4th highest moneymaker, just behind the Dirty Dozen and just ahead of Day of Anger. So I'd be curious to know what 3 billion lira is in today's dollars.
Let's find out. 3 billion lira. So $450,000.
Wow. Well, that's pretty good.
But again, in 1967 money.
Yeah.
I think it just had a budget of $300,000. Yeah. Budget was $300,000.
Wow.
But I think that might be today's money.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can't imagine the budget was that much for this kind of movie.
Yeah, because a lot of it, was outside. There were a lot of sets, and they did blow up a few things. Getting the train to crash was probably difficult to do. Difficult stunt work. Absolutely.
Yeah. There's so many cool things about this movie. I just love how the interiors are all like everything. Everybody's sweaty and there's smoke everywhere. It's just. But then outside, it was just so barren. It was an interesting contrast whenever you'd go outside.
Yeah, it always. I liked the scenery. I liked how it was always like, sunny and always, but like the sun kind of felt oppressive in certain scenes.
Yeah,
like
arid.
The scene, at the end right before Cat kills Bud, when he's being trekked across the desert to the hiding place.
Yeah, that was so good. Hey folks, I just wanted to take a minute here to tell you about the hosting service that we use at Haven Podcasts. Podserve.fm. Podcast hosting has never been easier. They do all the work to get your podcast on Apple Podcasts and other major podcast networks. They help you navigate the podcasting world, whether you're brand new or have years of experience. Folks, I can't tell you how happy I am with their service. When I first started this podcast, I searched around intensely for the right hosting platform. I found Podserve and used their simple 4-step process, and in a short amount of time, my podcasts were on the internet and available through all the major podcast networks. And their customer support is unreal. Every time I goof things up and make a mistake, like posting the wrong show to the wrong feed, I email them, and I kid you not, within minutes I get a response and the problem is resolved. And they're the only podcasting host that actually helps you get listeners. Other podcast hosts stop at podcast upload and don't help promote your podcast. Well, Podserve makes sure your podcast is seen by thousands of people. The promotion is free, and they put you on podparadise.com, which has over 5,000 visits a day from avid podcast listeners and is growing every day. Each day, Pod Paradise selects 5 podcasts to spotlight on their front page. Maybe yours could be there soon. Podserve's pricing is simple. Only $19 a month. That's it. No tiered pricing platform, just one low fee. For $19 a month, you get unlimited storage, unlimited podcasts, free podcast promotion, your podcast on all platforms, detailed download analytics, one-on-one customer support. You pay month to month, and you can cancel at any time. And when you sign up, you get 14 days free. You don't even have to give them your credit card. I love their service so much, I put a reminder in my phone to add my credit card when the 14 days was almost up. I couldn't give them my $19 fast enough. I'm telling you, I really didn't believe it until I actually signed up and saw my podcasts on everything from iTunes to Stitcher and Spotify and more in a ridiculously short amount of time. So if you've got a podcast and you don't have a hosting platform, I highly recommend podserve.fm. Check them out.
Hello, this is Rod Barnett. I'm the host of The Bloody Pit, the podcast that examines films from across the decades. On The Bloody Pit, We have several ongoing series of shows within the show focused on specific things in genre cinema that I and my co-hosts find fascinating. There's a long-running series focused on Italian maestro Antonio Margheriti's films from the 1960s all the way up through 1990. There's an on-again, off-again series focused on 1970s science fiction films. There's an in-depth look at the Western movies that William Castle made before he struck out on his own and became the horror auteur that we know and love. A look at the classic Coffin Joe films from Brazil. And our long-term project to look at every Universal horror film made in the 1940s. That's a long project, people. It's going to take us a long time. Sprinkled in amongst those are various other episodes focused on other stranger areas of cinema, like Lucio Fulci, Dario Argento, and even some obscure British crime films from time to time. So join me and my rotating crew of co-hosts as we examine the stranger side of cinema through an exploitation lens. Except when we don't. Yeah, you never really know exactly what to expect on The Bloody Pit. So join me for The Bloody Pit.
Did you notice, too, there were like a lot of little touches in the movie, like where Cat at the beginning's playing with his cigar, and then later on, the bartender asks Hutch who he's looking for, and he just plays with the cigar in the exact same manner, and he's like, oh, I know who you're looking for. Mm-hmm. I thought that was a cool thing without having to be overt with the dialogue, you know?
Yeah, and, as, folks who have listened to this show are familiar with, I am a big fan of advancing the plot without overly expositing. Show me, show don't tell. Like that's my my preference. And something like that, it's like, okay, clearly they know each other, they're familiar with each other because they have this specific, tick, for lack of a better word. Yeah, this specific tick or mannerism.
Right.
It's like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to bring up a name. I'm just going to do this to see if you are familiar with who I am looking for, because I could say a name and like, oh yeah, I've heard of that guy and he went through here. But if you just do something like, the rotating of the cigar over and over again, it's like, oh yeah, I know who you're looking for.
Right.
So like now he knows that Cat has come through there.
Yeah. Show don't tell. I think that works so much better in certain instances. So.
Yeah, and it again, like I said, it works because, in a lot of these movies, you're like, oh, I'm looking for, Mad Dog Lewis or, Wild Cat McCree or whatever his name is, like insert random nickname and Old West name. And it's like, oh yeah, I saw him. It's like, oh yeah, where'd you see him? Oh, I saw him down here. And then like, he sends word to his gang and like they ambush the guy who's looking for him. They never saw him. They never heard of him, but they know that this guy who's looking for him, maybe he's a bounty hunter or a marshal or whatever, and something's going on in the town, so they use it as a trap to kill or rob him. So if you're using just a specific mannerism that is easily recognizable without knowing a name, I think that's a very cool storytelling device. And I think it definitely takes away from the cliche of like, oh yeah, I know who that is. Yeah, oh yeah, he's right around the corner here. Just duck into this alley and close your eyes.
Right.
Nothing bad will happen. It'll be great.
There was one funny moment that I thought they lifted it from Day of Anger, but if Day of Anger came out in the same year, I don't know which came first, but there was the part where a cat steals Hutch's horse while he's sleeping, and then he just leaves it with it. He leaves the horse with a dude and just says, hey, if a big guy comes running through here looking for his horse, you can give that to him. That was just like what Lee Van Cleef's Orion did in Day of Anger,
Yeah, I liked that. Like that, that was one of the few like really funny parts that we had been talking about.
Well, one part that I thought was particularly funny, and I don't think it was intentionally funny, it may have been, was when Cat's in the room with the prostitute, and they're having their conversation, and this guy comes to the door, and he's pounding on the door, and he wants her to come out, and he's like, I'm going to break the door down. So he does, but the momentum takes him straight through the room all the way out the window on the other side, and he croaks.
Yeah, he goes flying through the window. See, I was expecting him to like back up and like charge at it, and like right as he was about to get there, they open the door, so he just flings himself.
That's what I thought they were going to do too.
But I think the way they did it was, was just fine. It was really funny. It's like, oh man, how are they going to get out of this situation? Like,
right?
Yeah, oh yeah, it was great. I loved her character though too. She was feisty.
Yes, yeah. Is she the one that got slapped, or a couple women got slapped around in this?
Yeah, like that was what was going to be something I touched on. Like this movie, there was a lot of abuse towards women, which I'm not a fan of. I get why it's in there because that's
right.
That was the style at the time. But like, there's even that one part where you can't quite tell, like at the beginning during the card game before the duel, where Bill makes a joke and like the girl's like, "Oh yeah, oh that's funny," and he like slaps her, and then I can't tell if he kicked her or he kicked her chair. I was like, "Oh, you can't laugh at that." It's like, what is wrong with you?
I was going to ask you that. Yeah, I wasn't sure if he kicked her or the chair either.
I mean, probably, he kicked the chair to make it seem like he was actually kicking her, because you don't get to see that. You just get to see her reaction. And
right.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of, like, I can watch a movie or a game or whatever, play a game, and, violence against people is one thing, but, animals or having to fight unarmed civilians.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean, doesn't mean, men or women, but just like, I was recently playing the one of the Tomb Raider games, and like you see, you're climbing along this ledge, and you see like a kid, because there's a tsunami that just like floods through this village, and like all these people are dying, and you see this kid, and he's yelling, and you see the subtitles like, "Oh, help, mom, help me, I can't hang on," and like you're inching your way over there, and like as you're getting closer, he just falls and gets killed, like just swept away by the current, and you're just like, whoa, that was just so out of nowhere. Like just out of nowhere, like you don't expect that. Like,
wow.
If it's there to progress the story, and in this case it is, because you are the cause of this tsunami, so your character is feeling more and more guilt, because it's like you're witnessing firsthand what your actions have wrought. Like, I'm fine with it, but if it's just for I'm slapping someone around just to slap them around, like,
yeah.
I can do without it, because it's not necessary. Like the killing of an animal, I'm generally not okay with.
Right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
But, again, if it advances the plot, then,
right.
I get it.
Well, on the same lines there, the one scene that made me really uncomfortable was where they get the guy, they go into this little town. I don't know I think it was a different town, because it seemed like it was more Mexicans than Americans in there. And they were basically telling him some important person's going to come through here and you're going to be okay with it, which I guess they were referring to Bill. And they pick one guy out of the crowd, and they were just like totally like not really torturing, but they were demeaning him. And then they were forcing him to bring a drink to the sheriff. And come to find out, the sheriff was sitting there, but he was dead. And that whole scene just bothered me. I hate scenes where bad guys do that to people,
Yeah, like they're imposing their will, or it's like, oh, there's 12 of us and one of you, and oh, we're gonna show you because you can't resist, because we'll just kill you or kick the shit out of you. Like that's shitty. Like, I hate characters like that. It's like, oh, I'm gonna show you how badass I am by getting 10 other dudes and, you know, imposing our will on you, and you have no chance because there's 10 of us and one of you. Like, I hate those scenes. Like, those characters are just so despicable.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I've been in those situations where, like, you know, you get cornered by like 5 or 6 people and they're like, oh, well, this is what's going to happen and you're going to do this. And it's like, you're not really tough. There's 6 of you and 1 of me. Like, how are you imposing your will on me and showing me how much of a badass you are when you've got all this backup and I don't have anyone? Like, how are you... Yeah. Like, if anything, you're showing me, like, what a weak coward you are. And that, you know, it turns out that's what Bud is. Like, not only is he weak, he's stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this movie, of all the ones we've watched so far, these guys were the sleaziest bad guys. I mean, maybe Ringo, those guys were pretty sleazy too, but these guys took it up a notch, I thought.
Yeah, I think Sancho in the first one.
Yeah. Yeah, he was sleazy.
Like, he was the worst. But, like, they also made him, like, you know, with the costume and the makeup and everything, they made him sleazier. Oh, yeah.
Like the sweatier they are, the sleazier they are.
Yeah, that's pretty much. And I've noticed that in spaghetti westerns, like, when they're trying to make a character seem, like, more badass, like... You know, they'll be in a scene and, like, everybody's sweating except for them. Like, we see that a lot with Lee Van Cleef in the stuff that we've watched. It's like, oh, it's 900 degrees in the blazing sun, but, like, he's not sweating. Like...
The sweat is afraid to roll down his cheek.
Yeah, like, it's... Yeah, it's like, oh, well, he can't possibly be a badass if he sweats.
Yeah.
It's like, no, he still can.
Yeah. You know, there was one scene that I thought was really good. It was very tense where, you know, Cat had made the deal with Bud to give him the gold. So he drags him out or he makes him drag the horse out by his neck to the chest that's buried in the ground. And of course he gets the knife that was hidden there and whips it at Bud's throat. But there was a moment when you thought that Bud was going to get a shot off at him, and they kept cutting back and forth, and the camera kept getting closer, like, to Cat's face, and, like, you know, he's got those piercing blue eyes, and just waiting for it, and then finally Bud drops dead. It was like, that was a really intense scene. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, like, it was, there was definitely some real tension. Like, you don't always get that, but this time you absolutely did, because he was just like, it's like, is he going to get winged? Like, is he going to get taken out? And, like, you know, now Hutch has got to finish the mission. Like, what's going to go on? Like, because that would have been a great plot twist.
Oh, yeah.
Like, having, like, the main guy get taken out. Because I'm sure we've seen, you know, that happen in a lot of films where the hero gets mortally wounded, but right before he dies is able to, you know, fire off one last shot and kill the bad guy and save the day. You know, it's
right.
I mean, we've seen it in the Shaw Brothers films all the time, where somebody is mortally wounded, but, you know, goes on fighting like, you know, nothing ever happened.
Yeah. Well, as long as they have plot information.
Yeah, it's like, oh, yeah, as long as he has important information for the plot, he's able to continue fighting.
We saw that with the sheriff in Day of Anger, where he got gunned down. You thought he was going to come out and be a badass. He cleaned his act up, got his gun on, and then he got shot. But then he managed to squeeze off a couple before he died.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm dead now. But I managed to take a few guys with me. You know, it's the Jennifer Grey trick in Red Dawn. It's like, haha, we shot her. Oh, she has grenades.
Yeah. But what was interesting, though, now, so the scene that we were just talking about where we thought that Bud was going to get a shot off before he dies, Bill finds out that they're gone, and he's pissed, and he's trying to find out who did it, and he basically figures out that the guy that was supposed to be watching was sleeping at the time, and he had told him, watch Bud, don't take your eyes off him. And the guy's like, "Oh, I was only asleep for a couple of minutes." But then he figured out that Bud and Cat put, I guess they put like covers on the horse's shoes to hide their tracks.
Yep.
So he's like, "Oh, that'd take more than a few minutes to do that." So he basically comes out, kills the guy, and he takes off with a couple of men to try and catch up to them. And one of the guys that stays behind goes, "Well, what are we supposed to do?" He goes, "Try not to fall asleep." Which I thought was good advice.
Yeah, it was pretty good because they're like, they had gotten rid of all the horses, and they had, like you said, they had wrapped their feet so that they wouldn't leave tracks.
Yeah,
and it's like, how long do you think that would take? Like more than a couple minutes.
I know. Can imagine. It's not like, you get plastic bags and zip ties that you can do it pretty quick. It's
yeah. And you don't know how many horses there are, and they'd left all the saddles, so even if you track the horses down, you're going to have to walk them back.
Yeah.
Bring the bridles with you.
I just thought that was funny. Try not to fall asleep. But man, when frickin' Hutch was pulling on the ropes, and you're like, "Oh, he's going to break the wood. He's going to break the wood." And then he does. That was so fucking awesome. I loved that.
Oh, yeah, just like kind of flexing. What does it remind? There's a... it's probably a little sacrilegious, but there's a picture of...
I know what you're going to say.
It's Jesus up on the cross, and he's just like super jacked, and he just like rips the things down. It's just like... I don't know what it's for, but I've seen it a bunch of times, usually around Easter.
Yeah. That's funny. It also reminded me of a scene from, I think it was, came out in the last 5 years or so. It was a Hercules movie starring The Rock. And he does something similar where he's chained to these pillars, but then he realizes his family's in danger, and that pisses him off enough to have the strength to, topple the entire temple that he's chained to or whatever.
It sounds familiar.
Yeah. I think it was a Hercules movie, I'm pretty sure. But it's been so long since I saw that. But it just worked here because, especially since he knew he had cracked the wood, and all he needed was one more tug to rip it apart, but he waited until I forget how he did it. He got the bad guy to come over to him, and then he just pulled his arms out and just squashed the guy's head.
Yeah. Yeah, he surprised him while he was slightly distracted, and then let everybody else in and like slowly dispatched them one at a time.
That was great. That was so good. Yeah, and that whole ending was interesting, and I had a feeling if he was going to set off the dynamite to bury the treasure, he would have already taken the treasure out of the treasure box. There was, even though he said he was joking, Cat, there was no way it was in there if he knew the place was going to blow.
Yeah, he wouldn't have let the treasure stay there. Like,
right.
I'm just wondering when he had time to do that. Like after he killed Bud?
I think so. That's what I was thinking.
Because they make it seem like he killed Bud and went immediately to the cantina.
Yeah, they made it seem that way, but I got the impression that he had done some things first. He prepared himself first, like they usually do. The good guy gets everything going, behind the scenes, like off camera, and then all of a sudden, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how long it would take to get from one point to the other, because they really didn't give us a lot of sense of scale or like establishing where things were in relation to the other.
Right. It's like, okay, we had to get from here to here. Like, he had to find a new carriage. Like, maybe he found the same one that they let go down the river, and like somehow it was okay, but like he doesn't swim, so how did they get it? And it's like, where did he get this carriage? Where did he get the horses? Where did he get, like obviously the bags were inside the trunk, so like that wasn't a huge deal. But it's like, where did all of this other stuff come from?
Yeah.
But, it's, he did it off screen, so it's okay.
Right.
Which I'm fine with, because you don't want to show him doing this you want to leave a little bit of mystery there, because not even Hutch knows about it, because Hutch is there ready to shoot him.
I think that was his insurance so that Hutch wouldn't shoot him. And you know what, though? At the end of the day, I think they were the good guys because he saves Hutch's life. He didn't have to. He throws him on his shoulder and gets him out of there before the explosion,
See, I think it's because he owed Hutch a debt. Because Hutch saved him when he was hanging upside down. Hutch also helped him swim. And even after he screwed Hutch over by taking his horse and leaving it, they still... Again, it was an uneasy alliance, but it was an alliance nonetheless. And I think he had just enough... He had obviously more honor than Bill San Antonio did. Because
absolutely.
Bill was like, I'm going to fake my own death to get out of paying my guys. Plus, I think they're getting ready to kill me and cash in the bounty. So, time to move on.
Oh, you just mentioned, too, that one scene where he was... Cat gets in that trap and he's hanging upside down. Man, he still put up a pretty good fight, even though he was hanging upside down.
Yeah, he still managed to, kick everybody's ass except that one dude that was about to shoot him until Hutch showed up. Hutch ex machina.
Yeah, I know. It's like, cut me down. God's sakes. All right, so I think we have covered this movie in depth. And then we've got a lot more to go because next time we'll check out Ace High, which is the sequel to this one. And I'd love to see how that one goes. So your final thoughts on this, Pat?
I liked this. Like I said, I liked that the plot was more than I'm seeking revenge on Guy A because he did, this thing to me when I was a kid, or, he did whatever. I will say that I'm hoping that the next movie does not have the entire same cast playing different characters. Because I was not a fan of that in the Return of Ringo. But
I don't. All I know is that Terrence Hill plays Cat again. I don't know about any of the other characters.
I just think it's funny that his name is Cat Stevens.
I know, and I looked it up, and Cat Stevens did have an album in '67, but I don't think they named the character because of him because he wasn't really that popular. He was just starting out.
Yeah, I think it was just a coincidence.
Yeah.
Unless, in the next movie, there's a guy named, Jim Morrison or something.
Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
But, yeah, I liked this a lot. I think Bill San Antonio was my favorite character because he actually had some personality as opposed... See, the villains tend to have more personality than the heroes in these things. Because the heroes are usually just, these stoic... straight-faced, everything we've seen from Ringo. Ringo was, interesting, but then we see him again in Day of Anger, and he was just this bland character who had very little significant character growth. But the villains seem to be the ones that are, the more memorable characters.
Yeah.
I tend to enjoy the villains more in these.
Yeah, you mentioned Sancho.
Yeah, it's it's not the actor's fault. I think the actors do a good job, but there's this cliche stoicism that has to be associated with all these heroes, and I think we see that over and over again. You generally don't have a fun hero. It's not like the Shaw Brothers films where the villains are the evil stoic ones and whoever the heroes are, they're always laughing and joking and having a good time.
Right, and that's just it. I mean, these guys are all anti-heroes, so they don't have to be, goody two-shoes. They don't have to be Superman. They could be closer to the Punisher, or Batman.
Yeah, they'll, and that's what I like about anti-heroes is that they have their own morality, which may not line up with what society's morality or what you would expect from, a clean hero. We see, Westerns have this kind of, not cliche, but there's a very specific way that they present heroes and villains. Like, the bad guys are always wearing the black hat and the black outfits,
Right.
and the good guys
Yeah.
always have the white hat. But a lot of the stuff that we've been watching, like, these guys are morally gray, and their clothing represents that. Like, they're not, like they'll wear brown or tan or, off-white or beige, indicating that they are not pure of heart, but they're not, evil. They're not bad guys. Like, they have, questionable morality, but it's still towards the lighter side of the spectrum.
Oh, yeah. And, that's the thing, too, is that the Hollywood Westerns are much more what you described before, where the good guy wears white, the bad guy wears black. There's a clear delineation between good and white. There's not a lot of gray area. And it's these movies where they kind of give us that. They sort of take the traditional Hollywood movie and Hollywood Western and turn it on its ear and present it to you almost in a more somewhat realistic, a more grittier kind of setting than you got from, like, Hollywood. And don't get me wrong, there's a bunch of Hollywood Westerns that I freaking love, but for different reasons,
Yeah, no, it's the classic, even looking at tropes. That's the word I was looking for earlier.
Oh,
Some of the classic fantasy tropes where, the bad guys are always ugly and misshapen and, vaguely humanoid. Like we look at Lord of the Rings, that's the classic example where all the bad guys are orcs and goblins. All the good guys are elves. I combined elves and orcs, and they're elves. Yeah, like, the elves are these beings of pure good, and they're all like, beautiful representations of humanity. And, the orcs and the urukai and the goblins and the trolls, they're all ugly, and they're all forces of evil. So it's like,
right.
Oh, who is our hero? Oh, this handsome man here. And who's the bad guy? Oh, this lumpy, misshapen, creature who, looks like he's in pain just to be alive.
Right.
And it's like, oh, well, I know who I'm rooting for. And,
right.
That trope kind of, has been more recently turned on its head. You'll still see that over and over again. Like, the ugly guys, tend to be the more evil ones, but, like, then they'll completely switch it around, like in Game of Thrones, where, like, oh, Cersei Lannister is supposed to be the most beautiful woman in all of the Seven Kingdoms, and she's, like, the worst, so you can't judge them based on how they look.
Right.
Which I do like.
Yeah. And speaking of, good guys and bad guys, you just sort of made me think back to Day of Anger, which we did last episode. I think that was, I didn't see it clearly until this very moment, but there was no pun intended, there was no clear bad guy in that one. It was Lee Van Cleef who ended up kind of shifting over to the dark side as the movie progressed. And I think that's what caught me off guard, because I expected Lee Van Cleef and Giuliano Gemma to be going up against a bad guy, when in fact one of them was the bad guy all along. And that actually makes that movie even better for me now.
See, I look at it as Lee Van Cleef was definitely the bad guy, but he was a bad guy who was out against other bad guys, and he corrupted Giuliano.
Yeah.
But
he got badder as the movie went on.
Yeah, and again, it was represented in his clothes. Like, Giuliano was wearing dark blue, so not quite black,
right?
But getting darker as it went along. Like, when we first see him, he's wearing lighter colors, representing his innocence and his goodness, and he's much more happy-go-lucky. Once he starts wearing the darker colors that were literally given to him by Lee Van Cleef, he starts acting darker.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, getting back to this film, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was very pleasantly surprised by it. I did feel that the first half with the flashbacks was a little convoluted, that maybe they could have done something to either tighten that up or delineate the flashbacks, maybe, the little sepia or something. But otherwise, the second time viewing it made more sense to me. And it's very interesting to see Terrence Hill and, Bud Spencer together for the first time. And I'm definitely interested to see them again together in subsequent films. So looking forward to that. So, Patsy, why don't you let the folks at home know where they can find you online?
All right. Best place is throwdownthursdaypodcast.com, or, as we mentioned at the beginning, thedarkening.com. You can find all the different shows that I produce and host between Indie Creator Spotlight, The Loudest Sports Show, Shark Bites, and, of course, the headliner show that I do, Throwdown Thursday, that I do with my wife. We're always doing very interesting interviews and covering new and exciting characters. Shark Bites is back after a 3-month hiatus. I interviewed author Timothy Miller, who just released his debut novel, The Strange Case of Eliza Doolittle, which I was not familiar with who Eliza Doolittle was, but it's the characters from My Fair Lady crossing over with Sherlock and Dr. Watson and some other characters, and I don't want to spoil it because it's a phenomenal twist. Some other characters that you might find around London around the same time, but that you wouldn't necessarily put together with these characters. So we talk about that. It's a really good interview, and I've been reading the book, and I think it's fantastic. But that's where you can find all of our shows. We're on Spotify. You can join our Facebook groups, and for anybody interested, we are currently running through the Loudest Sports Show. We're doing Super Bowl squares, so we still have about half the spots left, and I'm going to be giving away your choice of jersey or helmets, all autograph stuff from both the teams that are playing in the Super Bowl, and because we're based in New England, we have a lot of New England fans. Also, some signed Patriots gear. So
nice.
Be sure to check that out. Spots are filling up fairly quickly, and I know a lot of people are doing this, but be sure to check us out. Grab a couple of spots, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, because even if you don't win, everybody who does not win but enters will be put into a random drawing for one of the prizes that does not get given away, because there's going to be more than 4.
Wow, that's awesome, dude. Cool. Well, yeah. Pat, thank you once again for joining me today.
Oh, of course. I always love this.
Yeah, this is so much fun. And thank you, dear listeners, for joining us again on this journey into Shaw Brothers movies and spaghetti westerns. Don't forget, as I mentioned at the beginning, The East Meets the West is part of the Darkening podcast network, as Pat explained too. So don't forget to check out all their great shows at thedarkening.com. Send us your thoughts on today's episode at theeastmeetsthewest42@gmail.com. Don't forget to check out our website at havenpodcasts.com, where you'll also find our sister show, Then Is Now, where we discuss all the cool stuff you may have missed out on and stuff you should know. Folks, don't forget to go wherever you download podcasts and leave us a great review so that more people can find the show. And the East Meets the West podcast is now on YouTube, so just go to youtube.com/user/UncleDeath1 and you'll find all our podcasts there, plus other fun stuff. And be sure not only to hit the subscribe button, but also share it with your friends if you can, and get them to subscribe as well. That's all the time we've got today. Join us again on our next episode of The East Meets the West.
The East Meets the West is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. All clips played on the show are property of their copyright holders.